Have you ever felt like the world went silent? And in that silence, you couldn't even hear yourself anymore? You tried to learn English to sound confident, to belong. But every word feels heavy, every sentence feels empty. You scroll, repeat, listen, but nothing sticks. I used to be there, lost in the noise of my own mind. Until one quiet winter in Denmark, a stranger taught me something that changed everything. Sometimes solitude is your greatest teacher. The storm inside. It starts quietly, like a fog you didn't notice creeping in. One day you wake up in Denmark, the sky is gray. The air tastes like metal and your heart feels tired. You open your laptop to practice English. But the screen just stares back, blank and cold. You tell yourself I'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow never feels ready, does it? You see, your mind loves noise, notifications, voices, music because silence can be terrifying. Silence forces you to meet yourself. And when you've been avoiding that meeting for too long, even your own thoughts start speaking a language you can't understand. When I first came to Denmark, I thought learning English fluently would make me feel less lonely. But here's the secret you never expect. Sometimes the more words you learn, the emptier you feel. Because fluency isn't about speaking more. It's about hearing better. Imagine this, you're sitting in a small apartment far from home. The wind outside sounds like whispers through the cracks of your window. You open your mouth to say something, anything. But your voice feels strange, like it doesn't belong to you. That's the storm inside. Not a loud one. A quiet, heavy one. You scroll through YouTube videos about how to speak like a native. You repeat sentences perfectly. But deep down, nothing moves. Because your motivation isn't missing. It's buried, under fear, under pressure, under the belief that you're never enough. Here's a weird truth. Your brain hates uncertainty more than it hates pain. That's why you'd rather repeat old patterns than face the unknown silence inside you. But what if silence isn't the enemy? What if it's the beginning? That's when your story changes. Not when you learn a new word. Not when you memorize a grammar rule. But when you stop running from the quiet. Because deep inside that quiet is the version of you who still believes learning English or anything is possible. And one day in that Danish winter fog, when you least expect it, something or someone will whisper the words that unlock everything. The stranger in the café. It happened on one of those days when the sky felt too heavy to look at. You walked into a small café in Aarhus. Mostly to escape the cold, partly to escape yourself. The place smelled like roasted beans and quiet dreams. A few people sat by the window, typing, reading, pretending to be busy. You just wanted warmth and maybe a reason to stay alive for another hour. Then you noticed him. An old man with silver hair, reading an English newspaper like it was a love letter. His eyes weren't tired. They were calm, like someone who'd made peace with silence. He looked up, saw you, and smiled. A simple, knowing smile. The kind that says, "You don't need to talk. I understand." You ordered your coffee in broken Danish, but he answered in English. "You can speak English if you like," he said, his voice soft but clear. You nodded, almost relieved. Finally, words you could understand. You sat together talking about small things, the weather, the strange beauty of Danish winters, how time moves slower here. But then he said something that froze you. Most people run away from silence. They think it's empty. But silence is just language without words. You didn't understand it right away. But his tone, calm, grounded, almost musical, made you want to listen. So you did. For the first time in a long while, you weren't just hearing English. You were feeling it that he told you he used to be an English teacher. Language is not about sound, he said. It's about connection. You can't connect if you're afraid to pause. He laughed, adding, even silence has grammar. You just have to learn to read it. That day, he became more than a stranger. He became a mirror. You realized you'd been filling your life with noise because silence scared you. But maybe, just maybe, silence wasn't loneliness. Maybe it was space to listen, to breathe, to grow. When you left the cafe, the air didn't feel as cold. The city lights seemed softer. For the first time, the silence around you didn't feel empty, it felt alive. That was the day your real English lesson began. Learning to listen again. You start noticing it the next morning. The way sounds wrap around you like invisible threads. The clink of a spoon in your cup. The hum of the heater. The rhythm of your own breathing. Things you'd ignored before suddenly sound alive. It's strange, isn't it? How you can live surrounded by language and still forget how to listen. The old man's words echo in your head. You can't connect if you're afraid to pause. So you decide to practice listening, not to podcasts or YouTube videos this time, but to life itself. You walk along the streets of Aarhus and repeat the sounds you hear quietly in English. The bus stops. The wind whispers. My hands are cold. Simple things. But they start to mean something again. When you learn English this way, slow, mindful, curious, it stops feeling like homework. It starts feeling like a heartbeat. You realize that every word has a texture. Some are soft like home. Some are sharp like lost. Some are round and warm like hope. But here's the funny part. You don't just listen to English anymore. You start listening to yourself. The hesitation in your voice when you say I can't. The spark when you whisper I'll try. You begin to hear the emotional grammar beneath every sentence. At first, it's uncomfortable. Your brain wants noise, wants distraction. It keeps saying, this is boring. You're not improving. But that's just the old programming, the fear of being still. Because silence forces the truth to speak, so you keep listening. One day you catch your own voice repeating a phrase perfectly, naturally, without trying. Surprises you. You laugh out loud. It's like your mouth and your heart finally decided to become friends. And that's when you understand what the old man meant. You don't learn a language by filling your head with sound. You learn it by emptying it enough to let sound become meaning. You're no longer just studying English. You're remembering how to hear the world and yourself again. Silence has grammar too. One afternoon, you sit in the library surrounded by quiet. It feels almost too quiet, like you can hear your thoughts pacing in circles. You open a book, but your mind drifts. That's when you remember his voice again. Even silence has grammar. You just have to learn to read it. First, it sounds poetic but meaningless. Grammar and silence? Really? But then you start noticing something strange. Every pause between your words carries weight. Every hesitation says something your mouth doesn't. The silence between I'm fine and really is an entire paragraph of truth. You begin experimenting. You record yourself reading English slowly, leaving space between sentences. Suddenly the words breathe. They sound alive, real. That's when it hits you. Silence isn't the opposite of language. It's part of it. Like the commas, the pauses, the heartbeat between thoughts. You see, your brain learns language best not when you cram words together, but when you give it space to rest. It's called the spacing effect, a fancy psychological term that basically means your brain needs silence to remember. When you pause, neurons connect. When you rush, they just panic. How you start practicing silent fluency. You read English stories slowly, savoring the pauses like sips of coffee. You don't rush to finish. You listen for rhythm, tone, emotion. And something magical happens. You start speaking naturally. You stop translating in your head because your body begins to feel the language instead of thinking it. People around you notice. A Danish friend says, "You sound calm when you speak English. Like you mean it." And you smile because that's exactly what you've learned. Meaning doesn't come from perfect grammar. It comes from honest silence between words. When you master the pauses, you master connection. Because real communication isn't about talking non-stop. It's about giving others space to feel your words. And in that quiet rhythm, English stops being a foreign language. It becomes a mirror, reflecting who you are when you're no longer afraid of the silence. The loneliness experiment. Winter in Denmark has a special kind of silence. It doesn't just surround you. It seeps into you. The streets are pale, the sky hangs low, and the air smells like snow and distance. So one day you decide to test something crazy. To live completely alone for a month. No Netflix. No social media. No background noise. Just English and you. The first few days feel unbearable. You try to fill the space with something. Music, podcasts, even the sound of boiling water. But it all feels like cheating. You realize how addicted you are to distraction. Silence feels heavy, like gravity pressing against your ribs. You start talking to yourself out loud, partly to stay sane, partly to keep practicing English. At first, your sentences sound robotic. I am making tea. It is snowing. But slowly something changes. You begin to speak with feeling, not effort. You describe the world around you. The snowflakes look like tiny stars. The kettle hums like an old friend. It sounds silly, but your words start carrying warmth. You're not practicing anymore. You're expressing. You write little notes in English and stick them on the wall. You are safe. You are learning. Keep breathing. Every time you read them aloud, your accent softens. You realize that language doesn't live in books. It lives in you. In how you see the world when no one's watching. Around day 10 something shifts. The loneliness stops hurting. It turns into presence. You start noticing details. The crack in your mug, the whisper of the radiator, the softness of morning light. Everything becomes part of your English story. Every sound becomes a sentence. By the end of the month, you no longer fear silence. It becomes your classroom, your teacher, your reflection. You realize you didn't need people's voices to stay connected, you needed your own. And that's the secret no one tells you about learning English. Fluency isn't about talking to others first. It's about learning to talk with yourself, kindly, patiently, and with curiosity. When you finally step outside, the city hasn't changed, but you have. The world still hums quietly, but now you hum back. The Science of Solitude. Here's something your teachers never told you. Your brain loves silence. It's not lazy, it's strategic. When you're quiet, your brain goes into what scientists call the default mode network, a system that repairs, organizes, and connects everything you've learned. In other words, silence is when your brain finally gets the chance to do the real learning. During your loneliness experiment, you unknowingly turned your apartment into a neuroscience lab. Each time you sat in silence after practicing English, your brain wasn't resting, it was rewiring. Every pause was like a signal saying, "Hey, let's store that memory properly." It's the same process musicians use when mastering rhythm, or athletes use when memorizing movement. The brain learns best in stillness, so when people tell you, "Practice speaking all the time," they're half right. Yes, repetition matters. But reflection, quiet reflection, cements what repetition builds. You can say 100 sentences out loud, but if you never sit in silence to absorb them, they just evaporate like breath on a cold window. That's why solitude isn't a weakness. It's an amplifier. Turns knowledge into intuition. You start noticing that you feel grammar instead of analyzing it. You don't think, "Should I use the present perfect?" You just know it fits, like your tongue and heart have made a secret deal. Psychologists also discovered something beautiful. Solitude increases self-awareness, which improves communication. When you understand your emotions better, your words become clearer. You stop speaking to impress and start speaking to connect. That's why your English sounds more natural now. It's not about showing skill, it's about showing self. So yes, solitude rewires your mind. It takes chaos and turns it into rhythm. It turns learning into remembering, remembering into understanding, and understanding into peace. You used to think being alone meant missing out. But now you realize it's where your brain finally catches up with your heart. And that's what makes your English come alive. Not the noise, but the silence between it. When words become friends, something unexpected happens after all those quiet weeks. You start feeling English. Not just hearing it, not just repeating it, but actually living inside it. Words that once felt like foreign objects now feel like familiar faces. You meet them every morning and they greet you back. When you say morning light, you can almost see it. When you whisper thank you, you actually mean it. You're not performing anymore. You're connecting. That's when you realize you're not just learning English. You're building a relationship with it. It's funny, isn't it? First, you wanted to sound like a native. Now, you just want to sound like yourself, but in English. That's a quiet kind of freedom. Because fluency isn't imitation, it's intimacy. You start writing little journal entries in English. Not perfect ones, just honest ones. Today I felt small. Today I saw a bird dancing in the snow. The grammar doesn't matter. What matters is that your thoughts finally have a home in another language. The old man from the café was right. Connection is the goal, not perfection. And now you see why. Every time you speak, it's not about showing off your accent or your vocabulary. It's about letting someone see you. The real you. The one who once thought, "I'll never be good enough." But you are. Because you've made peace with silence, with mistakes, with slow progress. You've learned that every language, like every friendship, grows through patience and care. One evening, you meet a few locals. You talk about small things, coffee, travel, weather, but you're not nervous anymore. You speak slowly, clearly, confidently. Not because your English is perfect, but because your silence is. The pauses feel natural. The rhythm feels right. For the first time, English doesn't feel like a test. It feels like home. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and candlelight, You realize something beautiful. Words aren't just tools. They're friends that stayed when the world went quiet. The gift of being alone. There's a quiet morning in Denmark that you'll never forget. The light spills gently through your window, and the world feels suspended in stillness. You sit with a cup of coffee, and for once, there's no rush to be anywhere. No noise demanding your attention. Just you and the soft hum of peace. You used to fear moments like this. You used to think silence meant emptiness, that being alone meant failure. But now you understand. Solitude isn't a void. It's a vessel. It holds your thoughts until you're ready to listen to them. It holds your words until you're brave enough to speak them. That's the strange gift of being alone. You start to realize you were never truly lonely. You were just waiting to meet yourself. And once you do, everything changes. English no longer feels like a mountain to climb. It becomes a path you walk, one calm step at a time. You remember the old man's smile, his quiet wisdom. You don't see him anymore, but his words live inside you. Silence is just language without words. Now every time you pause, every time you breathe before you speak, you feel that truth. You've stopped running from the quiet. You've learned to dance with it. Solitude has taught you patience, rhythm, and clarity. It's taught you how to listen deeply. Not just to English, but to life itself. You notice how your thoughts form more gently, how your sentences flow with more grace. You no longer chase fluency, you embody it. And maybe that's what the journey was really about, not learning English but learning yourself. Not mastering pronunciation but mastering presence. So now, whenever you hear silence, you smile. Because you know it's not empty. It's your greatest teacher whispering softly, "You're enough. You always were."